Hey folks, James Abrenio coming to you from Abrenio Choe. We are a personal injury, medical malpractice, and criminal defense firm in Fairfax, Virginia, practicing throughout Northern Virginia and the state. This morning, wanted to address a question that I got recently. James, can I settle my own medical malpractice claim? I get this question a decent amount. We get a lot of calls for medical malpractice at my firm. Unfortunately, the criteria that we have set in order to accept a client is there has to be really catastrophic injuries, permanent injuries, or death in order for us to take a medical malpractice case. And so we get a lot of calls, and unfortunately, we're just not able to help everybody. In fact, most of the cases that call us, most of the potential cases that call us, we end up not being able to take. So I get the question, James, well, can I just resolve this myself? Do I even need an attorney to resolve it? And I'll tell you, at least in my experience, for what it's worth, I think you should expect it to be difficult to resolve the claim yourself. I will tell you, I do both medical malpractice and personal injury car crash cases. A lot of times folks will call me with a car crash case. Rear ender, liability is pretty clear, not significant injuries, soft tissue injuries, not a whole lot of treatment, not a lot of complexity there. And oftentimes I'll tell folks, look, you don't need an attorney to resolve this. You'll probably get a relatively fair offer from the car insurance company. And even though it may be less than what attorney may get you from a top dollar value, meaning the actual top dollar line, when you consider paying the attorney, a third or whatever it is, you end up making more money in your pocket. So a lot of times I'll tell folks with simple car crash cases just to resolve it themselves. Unfortunately, when it comes to medical malpractice cases, it's a bit more difficult. And the main reason is Virginia law, as it comes to medical malpractice claims, are just stacked against patients. If you're injured but due to a medical malpractice case, there is a lot of structural complexities in the system that protect doctors and make claims more difficult to pursue. You hear a lot about tort reform and frivolous lawsuits, and I'm sure it happens in the medical malpractice world. It's just I'm not involved in it, and it's frankly because the medical malpractice laws favor doctors. So what are those laws that we're got to be thinking about? Number one, there is a medical malpractice cap. What is a medical malpractice cap? In Virginia, the legislature has actually set the top amount that you can be awarded for a medical malpractice injury or death. So no matter how complex your injury, no matter how much treatment you have to get, no matter how it has impacted your life, you at most can get the statutory cap in Virginia, which is essentially a sliding amount right now. I think it's close to 2.76. And it's sliding up to 3 million. I think in 2031 is when the statute kind of sets that end date, and it'll be 3 million. Whether or not the legislature changes or not, I don't know. But currently, it's around 2.76. But obviously, take a look and yourself. And this video is not meant to be legal advice. You can't rely on it. You need to do your own research. But the statute lays it out. But that being said, the insurance companies are well aware what is the worst case scenario. Even if a jury hates their client, even if a jury believes what they did is atrocious, they know what the worst case scenario is, and they're always factoring that in when they're thinking about settling a claim. When you consider that with a lot of folks that are going to try to resolve their own claim without, life devastating injuries. And again, I'm not minimizing if you've been a victim of medical malpractice. Even if you didn't suffer significant injury, medical malpractice is not a victimless thing. I mean, it is very serious. I'm 42 years old. I've had experiences where I have not been happy about what a provider has done. And knowing though that it's not going to be make the threshold of actually bringing litigation, because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But that being said, the insurance companies know what the worst case scenario is. So do the doctors, and so they usually, if they're competent, they'll usually get insurance that is meeting that amount of the limit, the cap that year, and so they know they're never going to actually pay out of pocket. And so they're not really facing anything. So you've got that structural system against you. Another thing in the medical malpractice world and insurance policies relating to medical malpractice and medical providers is, unlike your car insurance policy that protects you if you negligently injure somebody in a car crash, usually medical providers have a right to be able to consent to any settlement. That means that without their consent, a lot of times the insurance companies simply can't settle a claim. So let's say you file suit, attorney looks at the file, they have experts look at the file, and they realize, look, this is probably medical malpractice, we're probably going to lose. Usually, unless that doctor or that medical provider consents to settlement, that's going to trial. And so, whereas if you are in a car crash and you don't think you caused the crash, but Geico or whoever insures you just wants to get the claim resolved, they don't need your consent to settle. So when you look at that, now you've got the individual defendant doctor having a lot of sway in whether or not they're actually going to pay you without an attorney. And that doctor's going to know if you don't have an attorney, you're already behind the 8 ball in this system. Another thing that protects the doctors and medical providers is the requirement that in order for you to serve a lawsuit, not to file a lawsuit, but to serve it, to actually start litigation, you have to have an expert witness, another medical doctor or medical provider in the same or related field with an active clinical practice as the person that you're suing. You have to have them certify that the defendant actually committed medical malpractice, that they violated the standard of care here in Virginia. Not that they were simply negligent, but they violated the standard of care. And in order to get that opinion, you've got to find a doctor or an expert in that related field, and you've got to pay that provider. And the doctors and the medical providers know this. And again, that's just an added extra cost involved in whether or not they're considering, should we just pay this person out without filing a lawsuit? And the other biggest thing, this is not meant to be a comprehensive list, but something to think about. But another issue, and probably the biggest, is just the way that the system works. It is so expensive to file suit and fully litigate a case here in Virginia. Not only does it cost money to get depositions to actually file suit, you have to have expert witnesses ultimately, in addition to, or it can be the same provider, but in addition to, be willing to support you in litigation to go against that defendant medical provider to establish that they violated the standard of care. Not only that whatever they did caused your injuries, and also what the consequence of those causes of injuries are. And oftentimes this can require one medical doctor or medical provider. Oftentimes it requires multiple medical providers. And I can tell you, they will usually be able to find a doctor or another medical provider to say they didn't commit medical malpractice. And so it's going to be this costly venture. I will tell you, at least in my experience, to litigate a case all the way through trial in a medical malpractice case, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes in the 6 figures. And so they know that in order for you to actually show force, you're going to be spending a lot of money. Okay. And so when they're thinking about, do they pay you with just a demand letter? Oftentimes they just won't respond, or they won't pay out, or they deny your claim, because they know that these structural systems are set up against you in Virginia to protect medical providers. And they know it's just that hard for and expensive for patients to get paid. And look, they don't look at this emotionally. They don't look at it to make you angry, to offend you. It's really a purely a dollar play. Does it make sense financially to pay out versus does it make sense to litigate it? And again, just the deck is usually stacked in favor of the doctor. Now, another question that I often get is, James, well, I have a slam dunk case, or I think my case is strong. I just need an attorney to write a letter for me. And oftentimes they'll ask me, James, will you just write a demand letter for me? We're not going to litigate this thing. It's just going to get paid out. And I'll tell you, at least in my experience, I don't do that. My practice, we do not just write demand letters. If I bring on a case, I have to be confident that, number one, that we're going to win in court. And number two, I have to be thinking about what is going to happen in court. And that means that I'm thinking about going all the way through. And that way I know that if the demand letter doesn't get responded to, of course, if I could settle outside of court, I'd love that, because it's cheaper for the client, cheaper for us, less risk for us, and quicker money. But the reality is, when I take a case on, I expect it to have to be litigated. And unless the case and the damages and the value of the case justify spending tens of thousands of dollars, it's just not a case that we're going to bring on. And when I talk about damages, we're talking about what went through you or a loved one. What is the consequence of this medical malpractice? I don't mean to minimize what you or your loved one's been through. I don't mean to objectify it. Okay. Being injured, whether it causes permanent injury or not, due to medical malpractice, is a traumatic life-changing thing. Whether or not physically you're back to 100%, every time you go to a doctor or provider, you're always going to be thinking about what happened. Again, I've been through experiences where I've had real concerns about medical malpractice, but by the grace of God, I haven't said numbers make sense to litigate this thing. So I don't mean to objectify it, but when I'm looking at a case, I have to be objective. I have to look at it from really a dollar value, because I, as a medical malpractice attorney, I can't take away your pain. I can't make you physically better. The only thing I can do is try to put money from the insurance pockets into your pocket to compensate you for your injury, to maybe help you get additional care, to maybe help you get the additional things that you need in the future. But I can't take away that pain. But in order for me to run a business, I have to make a business evaluation, because the quickest way for a small law firm like mine to go out of business is to not look at the numbers and think about cases from, do I think I can get the client a return on investment? And I always tell folks, look, you have to think about your injury case. And again, not to objectify it, but you have to think this way if you're thinking about litigation. Because if you're calling an injury attorney, it's to try to turn your case into compensation. You have to think about it like a return on investment, I mean, like an asset, and whether or not there's going to be a return on investment. Just like if you're flipping houses, you have to think about how much money is going to go into this case, how much money are we going to see on the back end? Because if I don't think the investment is good for the client, and because I do contingency, so we're riding along, in turn good for my firm, I just can't take the case on. Because I wouldn't be able to operate as a business if I just kept on taking cases that I'm not confident in. And that being said, look, I'm also not ignorant of the fact that sometimes, and a lot of times, folks aren't going to be able to find attorneys because of what I just said. They're looking at the case and it doesn't make sense from a money perspective. And so I always recommend folks, if you can get an attorney, make sure to get one. Absolutely. I recommend it, particularly in medical malpractice, just because they're so complex of cases. The body of law is complex. The statutes are complex. So if at all possible, get an attorney. But look, if you can't get an attorney, I get it. Your option is either to let the case go or to make a demand. And if that's the case, then by all means do that. And if you get money, I love that. I love that for you. If you're able to settle your case pro se, meaning representing yourself, you don't need an attorney, and you get compensation, good for you. I'm thrilled for you. I don't mean this video to be judgmental or to wish ill upon people or to discourage you. I'm just telling you, in my experience, why I found it very difficult to settle case for individuals to settle cases pro se, but also I, as an attorney, for me to settle a case with just a demand letter of medical malpractice cases, in my experience, that is the exception rather than the rule. Does it happen? Sure. But most cases in medical malpractice, we are litigating. Whether or not it ultimately settles before trial, I will still say most cases, including a medical malpractice cases, settle short of a jury trial. But medical malpractice cases are ones that are more likely to actually have to be litigated as opposed to a car crash case, that kind of thing. So look, I hope this information was useful. Again, don't mean to discourage you, but if you found it useful, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Comment below if you have questions. And look, as you can see in these videos, I try to be as conversational as possible. If you have questions, comment below. Hey, can you do a video on this or that? And I'll do my best. Just so you know, I've got a 6-month-old at home and a 3.5-year-old at home, and not getting a whole lot of sleep. So I'm trying to do my best to keep up with these videos, and I'll try to do the best I can. But keep watching, keep subscribing. Wish you guys the best. Be safe. And I do wish the best of luck for everybody. Take care.